Greetings, and we are live. Welcome. Greetings, sovereigns. Welcome into the space. Welcome into our sovereign space. We are on the verge of starting another helpful, informative, and mind expanding episode. We are kicking off the month of September with midday motivation that's going to be a little bit different. We're doing a plant based talk today for our midday motivation. And I think this type of midday motivation is going to really get you going. I want to welcome, we have a guest, Brother Christopher. So, welcome, Brother Christopher,
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
into the space. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining our sovereign space. And, today he's going to share a little bit about drugs and pain management and the effects of some of the drugs, prescription drugs, on his brain function. Brother Christopher does music, he does sales, and he was an ex-military aviator. Of course, I have to ask, what was that, what was that life like, right? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and just a tiny bit, but also what was that experience like being in military aviation?
Sure, for sure. It was really right in alignment with my personality. I've always been a traveling person. My parents were in the military. My mom was in the Navy. My stepfather was in the Army, and my father was in the Navy. And my original intention was to go into the Navy, but my parents sat me down and said, "Hey, like if you're gonna go the military route, go through the Air Force." And we went and we sat down with the recruiter at the Air Force, and everybody talks about how pretty the women were in the Air Force. So I had a pretty recruiter, and that kind of swayed my decision a little bit. And then my dad told me, he said, "Hey, if you go in the Air Force, get a flying job. They're gonna treat you the best." And I was waiting for this one job to be a boom operator, which basically means they refuel planes in air. And there was a long wait for it. And then my recruiter notified me that there was another flying job that was available called a load master. And the person who was in line for it next had died on a motorcycle accident. And if I was willing to take that job, I could leave like within 2 weeks. And I was 19 at the time. I had been living in Cleveland, Ohio, and I really didn't have a lot going on with my life. So to be able to leave in 2 weeks, I hopped on the opportunity. And then I got really lucky because the job I got into was usually they have what's called NCOs. It was reserved for an NCO, but I did so well when I went into the job that they opened up a lane for me to try out a special operations part of the job, and I did really well at it. I liked it. I got to travel. I started off in Okinawa, Japan, at the 17th SOS Special Operations Squadron, and then I did a lot of special ops work throughout Southeast Asia.
So that's where all of the traveling comes in, because you said you visited 25 countries so far. That's great. That's a long list.
Yeah.
What were your top 25? What was your top 25?
My top
What were your
25.
top 5 of the 25?
Brazil obviously is up here because I live here now. I love Brazil. Uh, London is one of my favorite cities in the world. England, Okinawa, Japan is up there as well. Uh, Thailand, Pattaya, Thailand was one of my favorite. And then one of the low key sleeping ones was actually Malaysia. I really enjoyed Malaysia and the culture there.
Right. Yeah, I hear a lot of people speak about how removed Malaysia is, right? It seems very distant, and you could live a life separated from the rest of the world and the culture too, right?
Mhm.
This is thank you for that little mini excursion into your journey and your life. Um, I know today I wanted to share that our topic is specifically looking at, a key focus, which is holistic, right? And I say holistic because we're not just talking about pain management and drugs and thinking about symptoms, but we're looking at the whole, right? We're looking at the whole person, the whole being, the whole experience, right? And especially what are the cues and the things that you noticed about your body that let you know, wait, going into rebound, or I'm experiencing this particular thing. And you shared some of that with me prior to our conversation here today. So I want you to, jump into your story. Tell us about your experience with pain management and some of the drugs. And as you share, you can start from the point of your injuries, right? How those injuries kind of put you in a space where you had to rely on some of these benzos. And as you get into some of the terms, if you could, for our audience, just stop and share and explain a little bit more about each of those drugs.
For sure. So I'll start with how I got involved with entertaining the idea of benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines are a class of drugs. They're a sedative. It includes Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, Ativan, and there's a few other ones that escape my mind, but they basically all do the same thing. It's just the method of release. So some people need like instant release, and then some people need something that lasts over the course of the night or something like that. Ironically, when I was participating in recreational drugs, I had no interest in benzodiazepines or any sedatives because I was looking to party. I was looking to turn up. So it wasn't something that came onto my radar for a long time. In 2017, I was using cocaine pretty frequently, and I was starting to have like panic attacks. It was difficult for me to sleep, and somebody had mentioned like, "Hey, if you take a Xanax after a night of partying, it'll allow you to sleep." And I tried Xanax with no intention to abuse it or anything like that. I just was really looking for sleep at the time, and it worked. I was like, okay, now I know that I can use this in my back pocket whenever things get really, really bad. So it wasn't something that I ever intended to abuse. In 2018, I had an ATV accident where I almost lost my arm. It was a pretty bad accident, and they gave me Percocet to deal with the pain management, and then they gave me an excessive amount of Valium to deal with like the sleep issues that I was having from the accident and stuff. During that process, though, like I said, I was never using it to abuse it or anything like that. It was as prescribed. I do want to back up though and talk about some of the drug issues I had prior to that, though, and the drugs that I was abusing. So when I was abusing drugs, MDMA was something that I did frequently. Cocaine was something I did frequently, and then alcohol was something I did frequently as well. All those drugs I was pretty much using until 2019. My birthday 2019, when I turned 30 years old, I pretty much made it like I'm done with everything and pretty much cold turkeyed everything. And I felt really good. My mind was healing, my body was healing, and everything like that. Uh, and step in whenever you want. I don't want to be too long winded, but during that process, I was using Xanax or benzodiazepines to help me with sleep. And I didn't know that I was priming my brain basically for everything that led up to like the ultimate brain injury, which we'll get into later. But the way benzodiazepines act on the brain is there's a hormone called GABA. Your brain has two main hormones. One is glutamate, and then the other is GABA. And one is an excitatory, which would be the glutamate, and then GABA would be the inhibitory, which basically cause you to relax, to help you sleep. And you use these two hormones for everything that you do in your body. It's a constant ebb and flow. And even to produce one or the other hormone, you need one of the other hormones simultaneously producing, at the same time. And through years of alcohol abuse, I was down regulating my GABA receptors. And basically, the reason the body does that is that the body is constantly striving for equilibrium. And if you start to produce too much GABA in your body, the body will start to produce more glutamate. And what eventually will happen is that the body is going to say, I'm done producing GABA. Too much GABA has been produced. We need to downregulate the receptors. And you have an excess of glutamate. Anytime you see somebody coming off alcohol, this is why they talk about it. They need to be medically supervised because the excess of glutamate is what triggers a person to have a seizure. What can happen on another level is maybe somebody doesn't have a seizure. Did you want to ask a question?
But so many things. So the first thing is though, the wow. So the thing is, when you take those depressants, they actually, along with alcohol, it actually allows for you to ease into dependency very easily. That's
Def-
as I'm hearing you speak about your previous exposure to some of them, and but also considering you are using alcohol at the same time. So I
Mhm.
can see how that dependency could have lingered, like longer than you expected. And, I guess you're leading up to the point where you reintroduced some of these pharmaceuticals into your life because of the injury. So,
Hmm.
I, at that point, I want to get to that point where, we see how it kind of stringing you on. So that dependency really didn't go away, even though you thought, because you said you kind of put it cold turkey
Hmm.
pretty much. But what I noticed from, just understanding how they work is that they create patterns of dependency. So
Hmm.
your body becomes accustomed to the release of the GABA and the glutamine. So it becomes dependent on the rush or the process of what the depressant does, which is to soothe or to calm you. What was some of the symptoms or some of the things that you saw your body going through? Did you have tremors? Did you have cold sweat? Were there hallucinations? Can you share?
Yeah, for sure. So, it's interesting because at the time I thought I was going through like alcohol withdrawal, and I did drink a lot of alcohol, but I was like, man, this is pretty intense, like to be experiencing this for the level of drinking that I was at. What I was actually going through was I was going through Xanax withdrawal, and I, so when you discuss these things, like words are very peculiar because you'll hear something like dependency or withdrawal when it's really the body repairing itself. The first issue I had though was sleep, and it affected my sleep in a way that like I had a really difficult time conceiving because throughout my process of like doing drugs and stuff, I was always somebody who was in relatively decent shape. I worked out, I ran. And my twisted mind at the time is like kind of what I was doing to offset the things that I was destroying myself. But I was having like significant issues sleeping. I was having significant issues concentrating and focus because when you have a lack of GABA, there's the excess of glutamate, and when there's the excess of glutamate, the brain can't process all the excitatory hormones that are going on. So I had problem sleeping. I had problem focus. I was having like severe mood swings. So I would be like very, 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 very depressed. And I'm not a depressed person. I've always been happy. I don't have a lot to be down about. I have a very actually blessed life and a lot to be grateful for. So it was difficult for me to understand, why I was depressed. And then, cold sweats or night sweats as well. Night sweats as well. I had that. I hadn't gotten to the point that I was developing tremors or anything like that, but that was like some of the very few first symptoms I noticed that something wasn't right with my body.
Okay. Okay. And so what did you do when you noticed that you had what seemed to be it seemed unnatural, right? Of course, because as you said, you were healthy, you're fit. Those weren't normal responses that your body would have. So what was the first inkling? Did you take more? Did you decide to come off of it? What was the the first thing you did or you
Yeah.
thought of?
So, um, I kind of just treated it like a shotgun method. I was like, everything that's wrong with me is from drugs. 10 years of abusing my body, and how you do one thing is how you do all things. Like when you get used to having a mindset of drugs and everything like instantly being afforded to you in that moment, like, oh, I can do a line of coke and then instantly be high. You start to think about life like that as well, like looking for instant solutions. So the thing that I did was I started fasting. Like I've always fasted. I shouldn't say always. I started getting into fasting when I was like 22 or 23. And fasting has been like my cure all for everything. I would fast a water fast for like a week, and then I would bounce back and be okay. In this particular situation where my friends are like around 2019, I fasted for like a week and a half, and for the most part, it gave me a good reset, and I was able to go back and start functioning normal. But that was also around the time like I cold turkeyed everything as well.
Okay. And so fasting, how did fasting affect you? I know it does help to flush the body, but how did you feel going through the fasting method? And I'm asking too, because if you're saying this is kind of like this has been the thing that you go back to consistently, why did it work for you? Something worked, something clicked when you fasted for the first time that will make you go back to fasting and use it. And I am like that. A fast or a liquid detox solves everything. That's like that's where that's the mindset that I have. But for you, I wanted to know what were the specific differences that you saw that made you utilize that method and use it consistently.
Yeah, so the very first time I fasted, the mental clarity was like the thing that stood out to me the most, and then the lightness of the body. I want to interject this right here. I think everything is a drug, and when I say that, people like think I'm crazy or something like that. And I say, well, by definition, a drug is anything that you put in your body that affects how you think. So I say, look at somebody who's hungry, and then watch when they eat and see how their mind changes. There's a chemical reaction that happens in the body that causes a person to think differently, respond differently, and stuff like that. So for me, when I fasted, it gave me the opportunity to like really purify the body and say, okay, what does the mind look like with no food or anything like that, affecting it? You're just strictly living off the breath of the word. And fasting allowed me that, allowed me to see things clearly, allowed me to think clearly. It gave me the lightness in the body that I was looking for.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. Anything man-made,
Mm-hmm.
if it's man-made,
Yep.
and created, of course, it's considered a drug. But this is true. We do have all of these different and various chemicals and hormones in our bodies that do affect us. And yeah, food can actually induce uh, altered states. This is true. This
Better
is
word for
very
word.
true.
Better word for word.
Right. And so it's the chemicals. All right. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to ask about. You when you communicated earlier, you talked about intolerance, right? And I think this is specific to um, your injury. After your injuries, you mentioned that you were able to use some pharmaceutical drugs to help you sleep. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what did you notice when it comes to, because you said you found intolerance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to know what was some of the things that you noticed that second time around, because I think you covered the first part, but that
Mm-hmm.
second time around after your injuries,
Mm-hmm.
going through the pain of your injuries, right? Because I think you said they let you out, but you weren't given any sort of pain medication at all. So you had to, according to the people,
Yeah.
they'll say you had to foot it. You had to do it alone. You had to work through it.
Mm-hmm.
But you probably found yourself leaning on the pharmaceuticals that you used before, because your brain knows it, your brain understands it, your body knows it, you knew it, so you leaned on it. What were some of the things that showed up for you that made you know there was an intolerance and therefore an imbalance? And then I see we'll stop and just greet everyone in the chat. I see a statement and a couple questions as
Okay.
well.
So the second injury you're referring to happened in June 28th, 2020. Sober for almost a year and a half. Like I was in a very healthy state. Like drugs and something like that were not on my mind. I fell into a fire. I had third-degree burns on my arm. I had second-degree burns on my face, on my neck. I was in a lot of pain. Not even to be dramatic, but imagine burning your mouth, and every time you open your mouth up to eat or drink, you can feel the crust cracking, and that's that type of pain I was dealing with. And when I went to the hospital initially, it was peak COVID, and I was in Alabama, so let that speak for what it will. And they were in a rush to get me out, and they just sent me home. And if you ever had any type of burns, you know how bad that stuff hurts. And I really wrestled with it. Like like I said, I had been sober for a year and a half, and I didn't want to take anything. Like I had made a commitment to myself to never take medicine again, but I was coming up on like my second day of not sleeping. I was in a lot of pain, and I was like, something has got to give. And I had some leftover benzodiazepines from like my previous injuries, and I had reached the point in my life I was like, I know I can take this responsibly. I'm not taking this to abuse it. This clearly is a medical situation. To answer your question about dependence, though, is that the amount of 1 milligram of Xanax is what I took. If you haven't took Xanax like in a long time, that should knock you out. That should give you like at least 10 to 12 hours of sleep. And when I took it, like I had only slept for like 2 hours, and I was like, "What the heck?"
Oh,
So it basically everything that it was supposed to do, it started rebounding. So I was having like severe panic attacks. I couldn't think clearly. Like I thought I had lost my mind. Like I had thought I had lost my mind. And basically, what it is that the GABA receptors downregulate so much that anything that comes in that tries to produce GABA, it has the complete opposite effect at an exponential level.
So, uh, so how did you function through that? Like, how did you deal with that? What was
Barely.
your because you're going through pain, but you're taking the drugs and at the same time not receiving the, so did it force you, because again we're talking about dependency as well, but pain management, so did it force you to take more? Did you recognize that there was a problem and you began to withdraw and sit through the pain? And if you did, what are some of the alternatives that you used? If
Mhm.
you maybe used herbal remedies or some other modality.
I stopped taking everything. It's kind of like you're in an abusive relationship and it finally starts to click, like what you've done, what that person has done to you, and you just like want to completely be done with them altogether. I was thinking to myself when that happened, like, man, how did I get in this situation in the first place? Like, I never thought I would be somebody who was taking, benzos or anything like that to cope with stress and everything like that. And during that, I just said, I'm done. If it's not going to kill me, I'll figure the rest out. And I didn't know what I was going through at the moment, but in that exact moment, I just stopped taking everything. I reached out to a few of the brothers and I knew, and they helped me get through it. I told them what I was going through, and it's something I'm still like working through. Like I'm still recovering from it. The nervous system is very fragile. Yeah, I don't want to go too deep in that direction. I know you probably got more questions, but yeah.
Right. Well, it's you talk about you did mention that if you're going through that kind of dependency on those sort of drugs like benzos and any other depressants, because some of them they're actually not, they're very, it's very rare that they would be prescribed, and that's because in the presence of alcohol it creates that long-term need to constantly go back to it, and people will begin to, those who use it will begin to rationalize, well, this is what I need. If I go into a social gatherings, I just need it so that I can, you know be present enough, right? Or I can, be calm enough, or so you depend on it because the brain knows there's a pattern. When I take it, it's like my anchor, right? It's almost like it stabilizes you. So give me a second. I just had like something cover my screen for a second. Yeah, so it becomes that you're pushed to the point where it's like, okay, I know it's doing this to me, but at the same time, if I have to go out, I can be home because you have an injury. I'm going through all of these scenarios. You have an injury, but if you have to go outside and mingle, most times you're not depending on yourself because you don't trust yourself, but you do trust what the drug does for you.
Mm-hmm.
So can you speak to some of those alternatives? Can you speak to some of those other methods? um if you use anything, right? Because I know you mentioned there are one or two herbs that you have used, or foods, so I want you to share some of those. But even before, you know one of the things I noticed was, there are a lot of people, there are over 20 million people who
Mm-hmm.
are diagnosed or assessed with having that dependency, right, on substance, and have, you know, not been able to receive the support that they need, right? I mean, of the 20 million, only 2.5 actually are able to receive the support they need and actually recover, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it tells me, and you spoke about a particular method that some, I think this was earlier, prior to show, we were having a pre-conversation, and can you share a little bit about the methods that are used to support people through substance abuse, and which methods are actually beneficial, and which actually solidify the dependency and actually cause people to go back into just constant drug use, as opposed to kind of pulling them out of that situation.
For sure. So At this point, I would like to encourage anybody that is on benzodiazepines or they know somebody who's taking them, like, get them off of it. Like, it is a ticking time bomb, and it's just a matter before a person starts to deal with the things that I dealt with, because the way it operates on the brain, it's just a matter of time before the brain shuts down the GABA production. To give people a few resources and the things that I've been using to help me, they call it a benzo-wise doctor, which basically is a doctor who understands very specifically how benzodiazepines affect the brain. Most doctors don't know. They're just prescribing it, handing it out like candy. And then when the people start to come back and they're dealing with the consequences, they don't even know what they're looking at. They'll just say, hey, we just need to up the dose, or we need to give you another antidepressant. Or another, a lot of times, say you're on Xanax, they'll say, okay, well, we'll give you Klonopin or something like that to offset this aspect of the Xanax, when really they're just setting people up for failure. There's a doctor named Heather Ashton. She's dedicated to her life to like helping people out and helping people understand how this process works and how to get them through recovery. What we were speaking about earlier was a process called kindling. And it's interesting because we're talking about benzodiazepines, but alcohol has pretty much the exact same effect on the brain that benzodiazepines do, and they affect the exact same hormones in terms of GABA. And what kindling is basically, like I said earlier, when you have the excess of GABA, those neuroreceptors start to shut down and they start to deregulate. Over time, they start to grow back very, very, very slowly. Like I said, tomorrow or yesterday actually has been 13 months since I had my last, benzodiazepine, and I'm still very much in the recovery process and dealing with a lot of the symptoms. But what kindling is that, say somebody has gone 3 or 4 months without taking a benzodiazepine, and then that receptor starts to grow back, and then they take another benzodiazepine, they completely restart the whole process of those receptors growing back. And the more that you kindle, the more difficult it is for those receptors to grow back, and the symptoms that you get tend to be worse. So what Dr. Heather Ashton recommends is she recommends a very, very, very slow taper, because it kind of lets the receptors grow back at the same time, and it diminishes the effects of somebody going through the dependency withdrawal. For me, where I was at, what I did was I just completely stopped everything. I didn't want the poison in my body anymore, and I was at a point with, hey, I'm just willing to deal with whatever my body is going through and getting back to baseline. Some of the things that I use to help me, I want to start with the foods. At the time, and I'm still having like a difficult time reading a lot of stuff, because the glutamate is so overactive in your brain. When you look at pages or words, it causes the words to jump around on the page and stuff like that. So me being crazy, I remember when they talked about Prophet Muhammad being illiterate, and I was like, okay, well, there maybe there's something in the Quran for me to help me get through this. And I had my sister, research some things for me, and we came up dates were like really good for you. Dates, olive oil, and there's certain foods that the Quran talks about to help people get through stuff. And I just ate a whole bunch of dates at the time. I still eat dates like every day, but it helped a lot with my digestive issues that I was going through. I think it flushed a lot of this stuff out of my system. But that was just one of the foods that I use, and I'm still using to help me heal.
It's interesting you mentioned dates, because dates are very high in iron. All right, and so, and it does help to soothe the gut. And I'm always a person, when you start talking about brain malfunction, or the brain having there being issues in terms of brain functioning, there's always going to be an effect on the, and
Mhm.
you can definitely, if you have an issue with brain function, you know that you're going to have an issue with digesting and absorbing food.
Definitely.
Always, there will be a diminishing of your bacteria and your microbiota. So dates are definitely a great thing for that. It makes me think of things like rosemary, right? That's a great herb that will help. Ginkgo. I think other alternatives, even to pain management. I think about skullcap and valerian. And those are things that I've spoken or suggested that can be used to help sleep, because I guess that's what's happening. The body's in so much pain, and also those receptors that produces the glutamine that you're talking about, right? It just constantly has you in. It's almost like you are. as you were explaining it, I was thinking about some of my students from my old teaching experience, the students who are considered to have attention deficit. Like you're just in constant motion. There is a lack of focus. The brain is overdrive pretty much, and the body is in overdrive. Um, so things like valerian and skullcap are mental body so that you can rest, but also helps to soothe the nervous system so that pain is not as intense. I think we totally ignored everybody in the chat for the last 25 minutes. We're just gonna just jump into the chat and greet everyone. I see our regular sovereigns and some new sovereign faces. So I'm going to go scroll all the way back up and greet Deidre Sully, MPH. Shalom. Greetings, top tier speakers. If you're here still, peace. Sister Kashia Knight is here. And she said we're loud and clear. Thank you. Sister Manira said she visited Pattaya as well, and it was interesting indeed. Sister Manira, what did you like about Pattaya? Y'all taking me places that I have never been or never heard of, so that's a good thing. What did you like about Pattaya, Sister Manira? Greetings, Brother Antonio, Sister Naya, peace, welcome. Tim Jones, and I know there's one other person here. Chief Yuya, welcome and peace. Thank you for being in the space. Thank you all for coming in and dropping in. I know there are a couple of comments about food when it comes to food addiction, but there's no comparison. Clearly, there's no comparison. However, when I think about the point you made that anything can be a drug because of the chemical effects that it can have, and then it becomes an altering chemical. Alters your mood, alters your behaviors. When we think about cravings and even food cravings, some people have no control over those food cravings, and that's because, and they're the processes they have to go through, but it is a chemical driving you to crave certain things. And some of it can even be considered a dependency, just as a drug, right? And I guess the most visible effect of food being something that you are dependent on is obesity or being overweight. So I guess these side effects show up in many different ways when we have different dependencies on different things or different drugs. You said it, you said a drug can be anything, right? And that's just because of the chemical effect that it can have. And I'm seeing that a couple of people are actually pointing that out. Can you all tell me, is the audio still breaking up? Because I think we've been talking for a while, but I think things have been choppy a little bit. So is it still choppy? Can you all let me know?
You're loud
Please.
and clear on my side, sister. Next time it happens again, I'll be sure to point it out for you.
Okay, all right. Good. Thank you. Because I didn't realize, I couldn't tell. There was no break at all.
There was something I
Maybe
wanted,
Wi-Fi.
sister.
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
you talked about like certain herbs and stuff that you could use. I would encourage people to use that before you get to the point of where I'm at right now, because where I'm at right now in terms of the healer process, the only thing that's going to heal me is time. And when you start to interject the herbs and stuff like that, it tells the GABA receptors to downregulate, and you're basically doing the same thing that the Xanax and stuff like that were doing. So if you're at where I'm at right now, avoid everything. But if you're at a point in your life where you're looking for like just something to help you relax, first and foremost, I would say start with your mind. Like, what is it that you need to relax from in the first place, and like go through natural methods. Like, I'm a devout believer in yoga. Something that this experience has brought me to is I go to yoga pretty much every day. But if somebody's looking for like natural ways, things that help, kava is like a really, really good root that I used at the beginning. I'm sure you've probably spoken about it. Valerian, like you were speaking to. I really wish I could use valerian, but the way it acts on the GABA receptors, it would completely reverse all the healing that I'm going through. And then something else that I had used at the beginning was passion flower. Is it passion flower? I think passion flower helped a lot as well. But I say that to say, like, if you're having issues with anxiety, relaxing, like, get ahead of it now before waiting till you have to take a benzodiazepine or something like that. Because I mean, we know the ills of the pharmaceutical industry, and I just have a hard time conceiving how, because there has to be somebody at the top who knows, what they're prescribing to people and the damage that it's causing. There's actually a good documentary. It's called Benzo Crisis, where he was a regular healthy man. He had no issues, no drug problems or anything like that, and he had to go through the full recovery process to recover from taking benzodiazepines. I think it was only for a month, and he ended up having 2 years worth of issues that he had to recover from. And like I said, they didn't have a benzo wise doctor, so they didn't know what was wrong with him, and they were giving him other medication, putting him on higher doses and stuff like that. And he took the medicine as prescribed. He wasn't a drug addict or anything like that.
Right. I'm appalled at how, the fact that they would even prescribe benzodiazepines at all, knowing that that is the side effect. And then there's another conversation too. Um, what about people who don't use all of their prescription drugs and it sits in the cupboard. It sits there in the closet. I say the cupboard, the closet. And what tends to happen is if we know someone who's going through something, we would share it with them. Or if we have a family member who knows, I mean, there have been whole studies around the, like opioid issues and so on in suburban communities and so on. But when I think about that, I think I can't help but to think about the fact that there are others who have access to it. It's not prescribed to them, but we have access to it, and we think it's okay. It's okay to give some of our drugs to family members or those who are going through something, because we think, okay, it helps us, and maybe because of the composition of our bodies, or just the way our brain is wired, it may not have had such an addictive effect on us, but it would probably be more severe on another person, right? But we don't think about that. We just kind of share it rather than getting rid of any excess or extra that we have. And I think that's a big piece to consider. And that,
Definitely.
yes, go ahead.
No, it's funny you bring that up. So my aunt, she had a massive prescription of Valium, and she lived in Denver, Colorado. And when I was like partying and doing drugs and stuff like that, I would schedule my party schedule around where my aunt lived, just in case I needed to pull up and get like some emergency relief. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go out this way, and I know if stuff hits the fan, I can call up my auntie and she'll have something to help me, deal with the come down or something like that.
Wow, so you knew where the stash was.
I did.
Goodness. You did. And I'm sure that's how the brain works when it comes to being able to find the depressant you need, or handle the pain, or even anxiety. It's kind of like, well, where's the next fix? Where can I go so that this doesn't have to be my experience, right? Um, and I really appreciate sharing, and a lot of our audience, they're sharing that they appreciate you sharing the experience. I don't know if you can see, top tier speaker says, thank you for sharing your experience, brother. I have personal experience with loved ones struggling with drug addiction, and I know how the people around are affected. Talks like these are informative and are helpful for those who may want to help the people they love, and don't know how, right? And you've shared so much about your experience, and then toward the end, I really like that you were able to say, yeah, these are great alternative herbs and foods to use, but this, the time period is critical. When you use them is critical. And I like that, because that's something that I don't think we always think about. We always think about, okay, let me just get the alternative so that way I can say, okay, I'm not on the pharmaceuticals, I'm not using those things. But its timing is critical. And I like that, to share that. I don't know if you want to speak some more, respond to talk to the speakers. Feel free to jump in and share and speak to the audience.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for everybody for acknowledging it, and I'm happy I can share this experience. It's been the most difficult thing I've been through in my life. Like I I guess it had to happen because when I had stopped doing drugs, 2 years ago, whenever it was, there was always something like in the back of my mind, like, well, maybe I'll revisit that down the road or something like that. And I think as long as that thinking was in the back of my mind, it probably would have happened. What happened with this though in the benzodiazepine recovery, like it burned everything out. I think it made me a new person, honestly. Like it's made me a lot more compassionate. It slowed me down a lot. You take a lot of things for granted. Like I miss being able to sit down and read a book. I miss being able to sit down and watch a movie and not have issues focusing and stuff like that. And I think one of the things that's been amazing is how you still see universal truths and like everything that you go through. So like when I was studying the nervous system, GABA is a feminine principle. It's the docile aspect of the neurotransmitters, and glutamate would be masculine. And I was just observing the relationship between the two and how just a little bit out of balance and it can throw the whole body off. And it really speaks to what I'm going through in my life right now. Like I making a vested interest of if glutamate is in the excess in my life, like telling me to focus, hey, I need to focus on the expansion of my masculinity. And that's one aspect of it. From the feminine aspect of it though, it shows you the beauty and like having a natural righteous Anu woman, how beautiful GABA is when you're able to relax and be at peace, and that calming touch that a feminine energy can bring in your life. So uh my relationship with drugs has been very, very interesting because it's taught me a lot about the body, going back to what you were talking about, the stomach and stuff like that. When I first started doing MDMA, it wasn't something like I haphazardly jumped into. Like I researched it heavily. I was eating dark chocolate. I was eating tryptophan. I was taking 5-HTP. And it's crazy because back then I was just trying to be healthy, but I'm a little bit older now and it's taught me a lot about life and the body. And I can see addiction, from a mile away. I can see when people are dealing with things, but because I've walked that walk so with so much conviction, I can talk to people and like really sit down and help them get to the core of it. And sometimes some people just can't be helped. Like they have to hit rock bottom. That was something that happened for me where I had created a mental force field around my head that the only person, this experience is what broke me open, honestly. This experience is what broke me open and like, made me be able to humbly submit to the creator and start to share what I'm going through.
I'm so that's so I'll just jump. I won't even respond because Chief Yuya says understanding neurotransmitters and the role of GABA A, GABA B, and other compounds of the nervous system is truly a hero's quest. Brother Chris has been sent on. It's a powerful penance he is owning. So that speaks to exactly what you ended on. It kind of it opened you up to learn new things about yourself. And I think the value is in learning, but then being able to share that with others and be, as you said, you could spot it a mile away. So now you have that lens and that perspective, and you're able to discern and decipher some of that type of conversation when you're speaking to those who struggle with those sorts of experiences, and you're able to help them, at a deeper level and not a surface level. So, and it's interesting that you said you were just taking all of these different neurotransmitters because maybe there was a reason for you to have to front load the body prior to all these other experiences that you're having. I just wonder about the things we do sometimes without truly knowing what's driving it, but doing it, and sometimes it ends up helping us, supporting us. So, thing. Chia says, yes, give thanks for sharing your experience. So this was great. We talked and talked. I didn't even realize it's now 1:20. There's so much more we can actually go into in terms of brain function, but what I'll do is I'll give space for you to share a little bit about the other things that you are working on and you are doing, right? You spoke about being into music and producing music. So can you share just a little bit about that before we close? Just share where we can find your music. And what I would like to ask too is how has music helped to support your journey through
Beautiful.
through all of this, right? Has it been an outlet for you? How have you used it?
Definitely. Beautiful question. So to find my music, Chris Magneto is my rap name, and if you type that in on any major streaming platform, Tidal, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you'll be able to have access to my music. So I think music is the key to life. Like I think the relationship that people have with music will tell them everything that they need to know. Uh, I used to like not have rhythm. I had no soul or anything like that, but it really spoke to where I was at that point in life. When you do drugs, it affects your breathing. It makes you breathe really fast and it's hard to focus and stuff like that. So when I first got into music, that was like kind of people always had that criticism like, yo, you need to work on your flow, you need to work on your breath control. But that's because where I was at in life. Where I'm at in life is like submission to the creator now. And my music has improved immensely because it's like the heartbeat. Anytime somebody's playing the drums or something like that, the best musicians are the ones who can be in most alignment with the drums. They can be most in alignment with the beat. The project that I'm working on right now is a toxic masculinity, and it's a flip on it. It's not really about being toxic, but I think for everything that is quote unquote toxic to mainstream media is actually what the world needs in terms of men. They need self-directed men. They need men with the purpose. They need men who are willing to stand up for the women, cover the women properly. So that is what the focus is on this project is. It was inspired by like everything I've been going through in Brazil, and it's helping me heal in a lot of ways. Something that's been really weird with this benzodiazepine recovery is it's messed up my memory significantly. Like I can be talking to somebody and I'll forget what we'll talk about 5 minutes later, but something that I have had a gift since I was a child, and this is not like the Jay-Z kind of way. I can remember my raps like crazy raps. I'm talking about 32, 64 bars. I'll be walking around my room pacing, and you would think I'm talking to myself, but I'm really rapping. And working on this project, I can feel the neuron synapses like causing my brain to heal and stuff like that, and pulling from the hippocampus or whatnot that allows my brain to heal and stuff.
What and so you spoke about toxic masculinity, and I appreciate the that those connections that you're making, and I wanted to ask about the other piece. I think it is the transition, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is transition about? Does it have anything to do with your experience? And just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So the original name of that project was actually going to be The Carpenter, and I had fashioned the idea because Yeshua was a carpenter, as we're told in the Bible. But once I like went to start laying the blueprint for the album, I realized I didn't have like the carpenter skills to build what I wanted to build at the time. So it was a transition in my life in a lot of ways. I had transitioned from living in America. I transitioned from the job that I was working with at the time, and it was a transition like in my focus on music. When I made music in the past, it was more of like a recreational thing. Uh, and I kind of had this conception like people were just naturally gifted at music, but it was a transition in my mind. Like, yo, anybody who's good at something has put in their time. Like, it's not something that happens by accident. And it was like, if you want to be good at this music thing, like, you really have to submit yourself to your purpose. You might have a gift with words or whatever, but there's still, time and effort that has to be put into this thing.
Thank you. So it's clear that music has been an outlet, and music has been an anchoring for you through this process. And music has been that skill that has probably helped you in terms of, you talked about memory and things like that. I know musical notes and tunes can be very, they can trigger. It's almost like their system, so they can trigger memories in the mind and so on. So, but also soothing, also very soothing and can help you focus. So thank you for sharing all of those experiences. You wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing about music. This experience, like, so when it first started, I didn't want to hear music at all. Like music, I could my brain couldn't process music. It sounded like a roller coaster. So I just was like entertaining silence. And then once my brain healed to a point where I could start listening to music again, it forced me to like entertain different genres of music that I wouldn't have normally listened to. So I'm a huge bossa nova fan. If you're not familiar with bossa nova, it's like jazz and Latin inspired. It's popular in Brazil, but that's like all I listen to now is bossa nova music. So I just wanted to share that.
Well, I will find a link and I will share it in the description so everyone who's listening can have a little bit of that experience too of bossa nova. No, I have not. Um, oh my goodness, there was what was causing that what was causing that discomfort with receiving music or
So
listening.
it's the overproduction of glutamate. Your brain has so much glutamate in it. There's no like this is how delicate the relationship is in the brain. You're constantly producing glutamate and GABA to process certain ideas. Even this conversation we're having right now. So when you have an excess of glutamate, it's firing in all parts of the brain, and there's no GABA to balance it out. So we could be listening to like Earth, Wind, and Fire, but I have a memory about Tupac. And because there's no GABA to balance out the memory about Tupac, the ideas happen simultaneously. So I'll be listening to September, but Dear Mama is overlapping on the track. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to hear music at all right now.
Okay, no, it's good you're saying that because I wondered if it was just confusing and the brain could not actually. I guess there is some of that. There's some confusion in that. All right,
Mhm.
wow. And this is all chemical, but our brain, and can you imagine? I'm going to go back to, the whole brain gut connection. Imagine if all of this is happening in the brain, how it affects the gut, how it
Right.
affects the body's inability to absorb food and be able to utilize it in any proper way. I can't stop thinking about how those two connect, and that axion gets just confused and probably doesn't even lead to like producing um proper bacteria, right? Levels of bacteria in the stomach. So, but that's a whole other conversation. I'm sure you can have. I know you mentioned or you touched on some of it because that seemed to be one of the symptoms that you had to work through. But I would rather go to the questions that we have in the chat. Top tier speakers has a question for you. Can you see the question?
Hmm. There are many who choose not to be open about the addiction. Have you always been so? No, I haven't honestly been, and it's something that I'm working through in my life. I uh I spent a lot of parts of my childhood like hiding, who I truly was. I was somebody who was always interested in the music and the arts, but like I said, I came from a military background, and that wasn't something that was exactly celebrated. And if you talk to the people like who knew me when I was doing drugs and stuff like that, they said nobody like said nothing to me because nobody could tell. I'm somebody who's always done my best to like keep it together and keep a professional image and keep it sharp. So I did my best to hide it for a long time. But I'm paying for that now. So one of the Xanax symptoms is that your throat, is another place where you can be in fight or flight mode. My throat has been locked up for the past 13 months, basically. I have problems swallowing. I have problems speaking and stuff like that. And that's because my throat chakra, I wasn't expressing myself. And it's just another life lesson I'm learning along the way. And I have no doubt that this is going to heal eventually. But to answer your question, I haven't always been open about the addiction and the things that I went through. But because I understand how difficult and how lonely this process is, to me, like getting my voice out and helping people is far more important than like my shyness or, anything that was holding me back from speaking about it in the past.
All right. I appreciate that, right? It's important to know that, sometimes you realize that even though you're going through something and it might be challenging, there's a reason that you're going through that challenge. And you said it earlier. You spoke about the fact that this helps you, this experience actually affords you the opportunity to see another person, right? And to really see them and see the addiction there from a mile away. So, and that goes to show how much of a benefit it is. So yes, you're going through it, and there could be have been changes, choices that you made prior to, but you made the choices you did, and now you're moving through that, and this pathway is leading you toward healing, but also to heal us, the healing of others. I that's purpose, right? That's purpose driven. I really appreciate you sharing. Everyone else thanked you, so I'm going to step away and now pull back a little bit from the questioning. And thank you for joining us in Sovereign Space, and more importantly, thank you for joining, but also adding to our sovereign experience, right? And just able to share your knowledge and your wisdom and what you've learned and gathered from your process as well. And so I'll close the day. Brother Antonio says thank you. So everyone to have appreciated
You
this whole
chopping up a little
conversation.
bit, Sister Marsha.
I am okay. Give me 1 second. Maybe is it better now?
Loud and clear now.
It's clear now. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to close by saying thank you to everyone. I had something else I wanted to add, but I will just add it in the description. For those of you who have enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe. Please go to Christopher Magneto's YouTube page. He also has a wealth of information there, so please feel free to go there. But his bio is in the direction beneath this video, so you can link to him right there. There are links to his music pieces, the transition and toxic masculinity is also in the bio as well. And because of the topic today, I included two, and I'll go back and include the resources that you shared with us as well for healing. I will place those in the description box as well. Thank you all for just coming in space and sharing. See you all again on another Midday Motivation. Peace and power to everyone. Wellness is yours. Hold on to it.
Peace.